I'm Sara Delaney with One Big Happy Yarn Company, and once again I am joined by
Jenny Fish,
my colleague and partner in crime, but we're only doing yarn crime. And in this episode, it is episode 2 of our Missouri Star crochet blanket. If you have knit friends, make sure that you check out Jenny's tutorial on the knit version of this blanket.
We'll put a link up above for that.
Yes, we will. So in this episode, we are seaming all of our blocks. You should have 16 blocks, and then we're going to add the border. So let's hop in. Let's get started. So I left nice long tails on my squares when I made them because I like to use them for seaming. You don't have to do this, but you can. And I like to do a right sides together whip stitch for this. So there's a lot of fabric and there's a lot of twisty turny stitches with crochet. And so whip stitch hides nice in there. So I'm matching them right sides together. I've got my yarn coming from the square closest to me. And then I'm going to go to the back and I'm going to grab one strand from the back, one strand from the front. Now you could whip stitch in the other direction, but I always whip stitch towards myself. I feel like I have better control over where I place the needle when I do that. And I'm just going under one strand from each square. Get out of there, extra tail. See, one strand from each side. Get out of there, extra tail. I'm just going to hold that now so that it actually stays out of the way. And I'm just going to work my way across. I'm trying to place the stitches fairly close together because I do want a nice solid seam. I don't want any holes in my seam. And it's okay to overseam. Is much preferable to underseaming. Like you don't want to just like throw 3 stitches in here because then when you put it down, it's just going to gap and you're going to have lots of extra holes. And like we talked about in episode 1, there are enough holes in crochet fabric. You don't need to manufacture anymore. So I'm just working my way across. And then I do have one extra little point I want to make. So, and my yarn tends to twist as I go along. So you'll see me untwist it, because that'll help to prevent knots from forming. Now I'm using the red here and it feels like right here, that's it, right? I have reached the corner, I've reached the end of that color and I'm done. I like to go one more stitch into the next color because if I open this up, see there's like that gap. So the bottom half of these stitches, even though those are part of our decrease rows, they really need to come together to close up that seam. So always go one stitch further than you think you need to. And then so that stays a nice tight end, I like to go through those 2 stitches one more time and slowly pull my yarn until there's a loop. And then I go back into my loop for a little knot. Then I can weave this tail in. And I'm going to go through a bunch of stitches for about 1 inch. And again, it's crochet. There's so much to the body of every crochet stitch that you can go almost anywhere and you're good. I've gone in one direction there, and then I'm going to come back in the other direction for about 1 inch. Just because I want this blanket to last, I'm going to take the time to really make sure that those ends are going to stay buried and that the seams are going to stay together. Don't skimp on your seams. I mean, I know it feels like you're so close to the end. I'm just going to run it through a couple stitches and I'm going to trim it and I'm going to be done. Take your time with your seams and really make sure that they're solid. Now, I will point out when you put these together that it looks a little butterfly-ish, right? It's not super square. And that's because we've made these on the bias, and it's even more pronounced with your bigger squares. You're really going to see it almost looks more like a book that's open than 2 squares. Jenny had the same thing when she did the knit version. It's because it's on the bias. Once you've blocked these, they really do straighten out, and they'll sit against each other in the fabric of the blanket, and that will help to hold the tension out so that it really does sit square. But I mean, if I pull on the points, look at that. You may have something that looks like that when you go to seam it together, or once you've seamed it together. But again, when you block it, everything squares back out. It's the nature of having worked on the bias from point to point. So you're going to seam your blocks together that way. There's a diagram in your pattern that shows you how to put them together. I tend to put them together in strips, and then I will seam the strips together. You can see that I've got stitch markers holding them at the seams. And then with the bigger blocks, I would put additional stitch markers in between, because as you're seaming, you don't want to, like grab a whole bunch of stitches here and then have too many stitches left on this side. So if you put a couple more stitch markers along there, then your seams will be nice and even. And then you just fold it together and seam it. Once you've got all of that put together, you're going to put your border on. So I'm going to pop these up. Well, no, I guess I can do it on here. You're going to put your border on. It's half double crochet. More of my favorite stitch. It really is. Like I have to think about single crochet. I have to think about double crochet, but half double crochet, my body likes it. My hands like it. The muscle memory is good. So you're just going to pick a corner of your blanket. You are not going to start with this. See, I'm such autopilot that I don't even remember making that. I'm sure you just saw me make that. I don't remember making that. I'm just going to take that slip knot off of my hook because I don't need it. And I'm going to go right into the corner. Now again, it feels like I should go here, but I actually just want to go underneath that there. I'm going to fold over the new color that I'm going to use. I'm going to pull it through. That's not a stitch. That's just potential. And then I'm going to, with my tail and my working yarn, I'm going to chain 2. That locks the tail in place. I can drop the tail. And then I am going to do a half double in the same spot where we came through with that yarn when we joined it. Right there in that same corner. Now, the math on this is funky. So a half double crochet is taller than a half double crochet on its side. So I'm going to be working half double crochets into the ends of rows, right? So there's a half double crochet right there. But one half double crochet made in this direction isn't as wide, and 2 is too wide. So you have to work 3 half double crochets for every 2 rows. And again, the stitch count that you'll want is in your pattern. But usually I try to just look for this like ridge, the top of the stitch ridge right there, and then the top of the stitch ridge right here. See that? So between those is 2 rows. So as long as I get 3 stitches between those 2 rows, then I know I'm good. See that? 1, 2, 3. Then the next one's up here. So I'm going to do 1, 2.
And you do that to keep everything flat.
Yes. Yeah, if you don't put enough stitches in here, it's going to start to pull in and cup. If you put too many stitches, your border is going to be ruffled. And then I've got one here. I'm going to pull that tail to tighten that up and then tuck it out of the way. One right where those 2 came together. Another one just on the other side here. And then I'm back to 3 between the ridges. And it's not precise because these are the ends of rows, and there's so many strands that are twisted around each other to make a crochet stitch. You just want to try and be consistent with where you place your stitches, and then the last one goes right here. Now, I will share a secret technique with you. You can see where those stitches dip and dance across the edge. If you don't want to see that, you can do this first row in the red. So if you did it in a matching color, where these stitches are anchored would not be visible. And then you could move on to your border color. The only problem with that is when you're working across the edge of your blanket, it's going to change colors. You will have different colors. So you would have to change colors in that first row to match the square that you're working into. But then once that's done, then you can move on to your border color. And from here, the border is simple. On 2 sides, it is 6 rows of half double crochet, and on the opposite side, it is 4 rows of double crochet. So you work your way, you do your 6 rows this way, then on the opposite side, you do 6 rows. Then you turn the whole thing 90 degrees. You'll pick up half double crochets along the end of the border, much like our log cabin blankets, which, if you love a log cabin, you can make log cabin blankets with us.
Crochet or knit.
Yeah, and you can check those out here. We'll put the link to the playlist up there so you can knit or crochet. And then you'll work your border on that one side, you'll work your border on the other side, and then you will weave in all your ends and block. Or block and then weave in all your ends. It depends on your process. I like to block and then weave in my ends at the very end of the project. Because sometimes when I'm blocking, I find a little thing that bothers me, where I will confess that this week, before we came into film, I was doing a final blocking on this blanket and I realized that there was something that was funky in one of the blocks. So I had to take the borders off. I had to take one of the blocks out. I had to remake the block, seam it back in place, put the borders back on. So having those ends where I could find them and just take things apart is a lot easier than trying to find where I wove them in after everything. So that's my process. And it doesn't happen very often that I have to take stuff out right at the end, but it has happened enough in my career that those ends being right there at the end has saved me. And blocking for this project, because it has a 40% wool content, right? Should we double check that?
Yeah, 40%.
Yeah, 40% wool. I find that a wet block is really important at the end, especially for the seams. So because these are on the bias, there's a lot of rack in that fabric. There's a lot of twist and stretch. And your seams tend to be fairly structured. And so they don't want to move around as much as the fabric that you've created. And so making sure that you soak this blanket and pin it out and pin those seams so they're nice and straight, and pin those blocks that want to twist and be diamonds into a nice block shape, it really sets the whole project and finishes it and helps your yarn to learn that this is its new shape. And then you have a beautiful blanket, like heirloom. This is the stuff, that blanket that Grandma made that you used to curl up under all the time when you were a kid. This is what your kids and their kids will be curled up under. And that is our finished crochet Missouri Star.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I love this project. I've had so much fun being on set making with you again, Jenny.
I know. We need to do this more often.
We really do need to do this more often. And we're so glad that you were able to join us for this make along. We really enjoy being able to share these projects with you. If you haven't yet, pick up a kit. You can knit or crochet with us. And as always, we are happy to have you join us. Happy crocheting!